Vikram Talwalkar, you are working with the Oxford vaccine team, which is doing the more traditional system of getting in vaccines. But the mRNA vaccines, both Moderna and now Pfizer, appear to have changed the rules of the vaccine game. How confident are you of the safety and efficacy, given that particularly Moderna has no experience in vaccine production in the past? Are the mRNA vaccines safe according to you?
Hi, Rajdeep. Thanks to you and team for inviting me on the show. I think we have to remember this day as a great day for science and mankind. I think the vaccines are safe. I know that mRNA vaccines haven't been used for mass vaccination programs before. So this is really going to be the first of the mRNA vaccines, which is going to be mass produced and given to millions and billions of people. But I think none of the vaccines have really gone through to this stage without being tested for efficacy and safety. So although people feel corners have been cut or things have been rushed through, it's not the case. It's really a credit and salute to the scientists that even less than 12 months of this disease being discovered, we now have access to a vaccine that's as effective as 95%. And with more than 40,000 volunteers not having any significant side effect, just minor side effects, just like fever or malaise, which can be dealt with common medicines, this is a significant achievement. So we ought to be really proud of this. And this is definitely the beginning of end of this pandemic. We've got a long way to go, but this is really the first step towards it.
I'll come to that, whether it's the beginning of the end. If you could, for a moment, Dr. Talwalkar, explain to our viewers the difference between the mRNA vaccine and the vaccines that you and others are working on, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. What's the big difference?
So I think mRNA is really where it's basically a genetic piece of the virus. It's artificially produced genetic code of the virus. That's the mRNA. That's being injected into people as a vaccine. That then goes into the cells of the human body, starts producing certain proteins or certain parts of the virus, which then stimulate the antibodies and the T lymphocytes, which are going to mount an immune reaction. If you compare that to the traditional way of making vaccine, which is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, that relies on a vector, which means that relies on a vehicle. So you have a different virus, an adenovirus, which is then joined with a protein part, or the spike protein as we call it, of the COVID. That's actually superimposed on that inert adenovirus, and that's being injected as part of the vaccine. So the spike protein stimulates the immunity, both the antibodies as well as the long-term T lymphocytes. Right. So it's the short-term and the long-term immune response. That's the key difference. You have a genetic code which is artificially produced being injected, and you've got the actual inert virus superimposed with the COVID virus protein.
But your sense, both equally safe? I know the mRNA vaccine much more expensive, but is it equally safe, Dr. Talwalkar?
Yes. Again, as I said, this is going to be unprecedented. We are using these vaccines for the first time, the mRNA ones. The traditional vaccines, there are many diseases for which we use them. But so far, all the trial results, not just for COVID mRNA, but many other mRNA vaccines, as well as this one, which has been tried in more than 40,000 volunteers, the safety profile is excellent. And so there should be no concern in going forward and having this vaccination. Okay. But the key remains is that if you look at the mRNA vaccine versus the Oxford vaccine, which is the traditional, there are significant advantages for the Oxford vaccine if you look at the future for countries like India or rest of the world. As we know, it's less price, it's about 1/10 of the price, it's much more stable at room temperature, and it uses half and full dose, which means it can be given to larger number of participants. So I think if you start with mRNA, get a good grip on the virus in as many countries as we can, the future then belongs to other vaccines taking over that job, like the Oxford or the other vaccines which are being done by ICMR and all the others.
That's very interesting the way you're putting it, that first you'll have the Western world, which now starting next week will have the opportunity or the option to use the mRNA vaccines, and then the vector viral vaccines, which are cheaper, room temperature, could be used in countries like India. But